Friday FARcast. This is Robert Phoenix, and I am broadcasting to you live from Austin, Texas, while David Bowie croons in the background about dancing out in space. And we are all out in space now. The moments and pivots and foundations that connect us to temporal reality are getting harder and harder to hold on to. When I was a kid, I used to go to this fun house in San Francisco. It was in a place called Playland. And Playland was one of these amusement parks. They were all over the place in the 1950s. There were amusement parks everywhere, especially up and along the coast of California. They're all over the place because people needed something to do. They had to go amuse themselves, right? And there was a real push towards mechanization and building stuff, factories. Remember that? Because there were outward and physical manifestations where people would go. And this is a holdover from the Victorian era, because during the Victorian era in America and throughout the world, but mostly in America, people would go out and seek amusements. They would go out and try to find some form of family entertainment, whether it was walking down a promenade or going to the 19th century version of an amusement park. And this wave, this desire to recreate moved forward and kind of morphed into the amusement park concept of the 20th century. And the amusement park was also an amalgamation of another kind of entity called the carnival. So the carnival, of course, traveled from town to town to town to town to town and would give people the chance to lose their money. If you don't know where the word mark comes from, I'll tell you. So for instance, somebody who is clueless is called a mark. A mark, that guy's a mark. When you go into a casino, they're watching you, and they know who the marks are. They know who the clueless people are. And it's become very sophisticated, not just in terms of being able to watch if people are cheating at cards, but they could actually develop a psychological profile very quickly with all the cameras, all the biometrics, very sophisticated software, so that they can increase their chances of taking money from you. And this goes back to carnival days. And what would happen is that the carnival would open, you'd have the barker, welcome, 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 come on in, da 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 da. And he would, and he would engage people. And he would have a conversation with somebody, or he'd size them up. These carnival barkers were very sophisticated people in their own way, psychologically sophisticated. So if somebody looked like a country bumpkin, and could have their wallet separated from them very quickly, he would have somebody's texting me on Facebook. What is this? What is going on here? Hold on. Okay. So I got to get rid of Facebook right now. My apologies. I leave it open sometimes because somebody wants to pass me information, which is always good, especially if things are breaking. But anyway, when you would come into the carnival, the barker would have a piece of chalk on his hand. It was tied around one of his fingers, and so he would have his magic wand or whatever he had in one hand, and in the other hand he had a piece of chalk. And so if he determined that you could be separated from your money very quickly, he'd come up to you and pat you on the back. Well, you would talk, and you'd say, well, come on in, and pat you on the back, and there would be a chalk mark on your back. So that when you walked around the carnival, the guys who were doing the games where you'd invariably lose your money would know that you were a mark, that you were easy, and that they would, instead of having to work 5 or 6 people to get to their money. Hey, how about you? How about you? They just focus on the mark. And they would work the mark. And it worked. It worked. So the carnival merged with this idea of Victorian entertainment. It became the amusement park. And we have some of the, they're still around. You still have to play the games, and you still have to lose the money. Now they've got it so you can just buy the prize. They're not as bloodthirsty. But the traveling circuses, the traveling carnivals are still around. The amusement park is an outgrowth of that. So I went to this amusement park when I was a kid called Playland. And it was a decrepit place from the 1950s. This is now the 1940s, 50s, now the 60s. And it's a place where people get high, get drunk, take methamphetamine. It's dark. It's got a dark vibe. But they have one of the great fun houses of all time. Of course, they had the Laughing Sal, who was this absolutely demonic, mechanical fat woman. And I would just lose my shit, pardon my language, when I saw Laughing Sal. I didn't like Laughing Sal. Nobody did. Nobody did. Laughing Sal was creepy. I eventually confronted my Laughing Sal fear. She got moved down to Santa Cruz, Beach and Boardwalk. And I stared Laughing Sal down. And I won. I took back a part of my soul in that moment. One of the rides they had in the funhouse was a turntable. A giant turntable. It was a giant wheel. And what you would do is you would sit on the wheel. And the wheel would spin around and around and around and around and around very quickly, very fast. And then it would throw you off the wheel. And you would go flying off the wheel, and you slide off the wheel, and you would slam into a padded wall. By the way, this type of ride would never exist today. Never. But back then, it was great. It was fun. And basically, you tried to get on the wheel and stay on the wheel. But if you got thrown off the wheel, it wasn't that big a deal because it was fun. It was fun. And what did you want to do again? You wanted to get right back on the wheel because the velocity of getting thrown off, the velocity of losing control, but knowing somehow you're going to hit a padded exterior added to the whole adrenaline rush. And the wheel is a lot like life. We get thrown off the wheel again and again and again. Now, the problem is, or the challenge, if we want to look at it from a more enlightened perspective, is that when you're a kid, you get padded walls to fly into. That's the nature of being a child. We are protected as children. There is a spiritual embryo that surrounds us. And that spiritual embryo, by the way, degrades around the age of 21, which coincides with the third Saturn square to the sun. And then by 28, we're in the Saturn return. And there's a new period of reintegration, and the responsibility and accountability for building one's own permeable egg, as it were, is incumbent upon the individual. That's why they say children and drunks are protected by angels to some extent. It is true. On the child side, it is definitely true. On the adult side, it becomes less true at times. But the drunks are protected not for themselves, but for other people. Not always, but it does happen. So as we get older and we get back on the wheel, the padded wall isn't there. Somebody forgets to tell us that they've removed the padded wall. So then when we're on the turntable and spins around and around and around at an incredible velocity, we get thrown off. We're hitting a wall that's hard. It's painful. And getting back on the wheel is not always something that you want to do. But we do it again and again and again. Now, one might make a case to walk out of the funhouse, that you don't have to get back on the wheel. Or perhaps you could go into the Hall of Mirrors and see distorted reflections of who you are. The funhouse is a metaphor for life. If you haven't figured it out, it's a metaphor for life. It's all in there. Most funhouses have a maze, a labyrinth that you have to get through. That's how this funhouse was. You walk in, you get your ticket, and you've got to walk through a maze in order to get inside, to find the cheese. Psychologically, it's very, this funhouse was, it must have been put together by Tavistock, to be honest with you, because it's all in there. Even the slide, right? There's the slide. The slide, you have to climb way to the top of the slide. It was a great slide. Like the funhouse was, it was, about 4 stories high on the inside. So you climb up these stairs, you go way to the top of the slide, and you get your burlap sack. And you come sliding down these varnished pieces of wood that have their little sort of rises and falls, and the little berms in the slide. So you could actually even get airborne a little bit off these slides. But what happens with the slide? You get to the top and you've got to come down. And the ride down is thrilling. The ride to the top takes some work. The route takes some work. So getting back to the wheel though, the purpose is to stay on and to not get thrown off. Well, how do you stay on? How do you stay on the wheel? You find the center. If you can sit your butt in the center of the wheel, then you can watch everything spin around you. And you can watch bodies flying off into space, maniacally laughing as they slam into the wall. However, getting to the center took work. You literally had to outrun everybody else to get to that center. Or you had to push them away, move them off the center. And then that brings in a wholly different style of psychological rendering. The grab for real estate. To find the axis mundi, somebody else must be moved off. There's not a lot of room on the center in that ride. And you've got 25 people trying to get to it. And heaven help the poor SOBs that are kind of on the outer fringes, because once it starts spinning, they get tossed off quickly. What does the center mean in our culture, in our society? The center means being close to the center of power. Because if you're in the center of power, and this is from a cultural level, if you're in the center of power, you're watching the poor bastards near the edge, near the fringe, get thrown off really quickly. And you've got bodies and bodies and bodies ahead of you. It's like a hierarchy. And that's why we have, to a large extent, a psychopathic society, because think of the wheel as a metaphor. They want to get to the center. In order to get to the center, there can't be that many people there. And when you get there, somebody else has to move off the center. Most of us don't know that. Most of us don't understand that. Most of us are willing to get back on the wheel and get tossed off. But after a while, you just sit around and go, this is not a worthwhile exercise, especially when they remove the pads. Now, people that are very sophisticated, and this is where families come into play. And I never had this when I was young and growing up, but I would assume, because it happens, that in families, children are prepared to grab the center. Children are cultivated, whether it's through some means of meaningful, instructive, benevolent kinds of instructions, like, hey, you've always got to be the best. You've got to get as close to running things as possible because you don't want to be downstream. And I'm going to support you in that. And I'll push you in that. This is very prevalent in more cultures than other cultures. And I'm going to cross some lines here. This is actually quite prevalent in the Asian culture. Now, it may not be to the extent of, hey, you want to be in the center so you can watch other people fly off the wheel, but it will be more aligned with you've got to be successful and you have to reach a level of heightened proficiency so that there are people downstream and that you can make a lot of money and succeed and have a family and have a life and continue to have this continuity of legacy. Another group that practices this very intensely, and I'm going to cross a line here, are our friends from the Jewish culture. They place a large emphasis on success, achievement, and the acquisition of power, getting as close to the center as possible. And you know what? Send me emails, flame away, I don't care. And I know for a fact, because I have spent a lot of time with friends who are Jewish, and I heard their stories. And I know kind of how the culture operates. So we get into the familial situation, and then you get into sort of like, dynastic Anglo culture, where you go to the right school and you apply to the right fraternity, which is really a secret society for young adults, and you go through all those steps so that you could arrive at some place in the annals of power with the same people who are doing the same thing and getting close to the center. You see, it all starts with our families and it all starts with our children. Some kids are cultivated to get to the center. Other children, they're allowed to be, they're allowed to do, they're allowed to experience their own life. And if they find the center, then that's on them. Perhaps they are preternaturally disposed. Perhaps it's in their chart. And they migrate towards that experience. That was not my experience, by the way. That was not how I was raised. I was raised in a way where my father tried to give me life lessons. Basically, don't shit on other people. Treat everybody equally. Don't talk about people behind their back. These were the things that I was raised with. Not, maybe a few other lessons along the way. But it had nothing to do with being in the center of the wheel. Because that was not my father's experience. My father was one of the guys that got blown off the wheel. And he got blown off the wheel without the pad as a kid. So he didn't understand that. But ironically, it was my father who took me to the amusement park. My father who told me that to be successful on the wheel, you had to sit in the center. So one day I got on the wheel. And I decided to get as close to the center as possible. This was my goal. And I did. I wasn't in the center, but I was as close to the center as possible. There must have been about 3 or 4 of us. And as the wheel turned and spun and picked up velocity, I could feel the gravity just wanting to not even the gravity, the RPMs wanting to take me right off that wheel. The centrifugal force of the moment, which is where we are all the time. The centrifugal force of the moment wants to take us off the wheel, unless we are close to the center. Now, there's a different definition of the center, which I'll talk about, obviously. But I got in there, and there was about 4 of us. And I figured out that if I could extend my hands out further than the rest of my body and create almost like an A-frame geometry on that wheel, that I could redistribute my weight down back into the wheel. But it took will in order for me to stay there. It was not an effortless moment where I was sitting cross-legged and doing mudras on the center of the wheel while everyone else spun off into space. No. I was close to the center and I hung on for dear life. And I stayed on the wheel. And I never went back on the wheel again. So what's the metaphor? What's the lesson? And we all have these when we're kids. If you search your own history and background, you'll find that there are iconic moments when you were a child, archetypal moments when you were a child. You'll remember them. I think for my son, one of his archetypal moments, iconic moments, is being lost on the Uptown train, Uptown New York subway 2 summers ago. He'll remember that for the rest of his life. He'll also remember the kindness of the stranger, the woman who was pregnant with her husband, who spotted him and brought him back to the station. He'll remember that. And hopefully he'll have the presence of mind to understand what that means for his life as well. To be aware, to be conscious, to be considerate, to help another person in a moment of need. That's his lesson. If he's aware, if he's awake. And if you go back into your prehistory, right? When prehistory, meaning that before you've kind of, really sort of garnered your own thoughts, said this is who I am and this is what I'm doing, you're going to see these moments in your life. And if you're a parent, you'll see them in your child's life as well. So here we are. We're all hanging on to the center now to some extent. Some of us aren't. Some of us are letting go. There's a different way of being in the center, of course. Of course, there's a different way. One of the things is you don't have to get on the wheel. You just don't. And for some people, that is a really valid exercise. But if you're on the wheel, you have to find the center. You have to find the exact middle point of the universe, the galactic center. And the galactic center is at 27, which is late 26, Sagittarius. That is the axis mundi of the entire galaxy. Then there's the supergalactic center in Libra, but we're not talking about that. I like the galactic center. Jupiter conjunct the sun. Jupiter conjunct the galactic center in my chart. First house. So I have a relationship with the galactic center. We commune on a daily basis. We do our best to. But to get into this Obama thing and the Hillary thing and the Trump thing, some news coming out now about Trump, which I will reference. Apparently, some congressman is trying to have Trump indicted for human trafficking. I'll get into that a little bit later. The headline is far more salacious and egregious than the actual details of what he did, or apparently did, or might have done. And in comparison to whatever Hillary's done, let me just tell you, it is nothing. Nothing. All right, so before we get into the Obama thing, so last Friday, the reason why I didn't do the show is because I was at think of a pressure cooker, and the pressure cooker is about to explode. That was the level of intensity that I was dealing with last Friday. Astrologically, Mars, Pluto square, Mars, midheaven square, it was big. I was a volcano ready to blow. Think of Mars, think of the tower in the major arcana. Interesting story. I did a little bit of an online oracle on Friday, and there's the card that I got was just one card. It was the scythe. The scythe. And we know that the scythe, I'll give you, okay. This is a really interesting reference for the scythe. What do we connect the scythe with? We connect the scythe with the Grim Reaper, right? The Grim Reaper is, got the scythe, and the scythe they use in the fields to cut the wheat from the roots of the earth. It's the end of the wheat. That's what a scythe is for. It terminates the wheat's connection with its roots. Therefore, the wheat ceases to be wheat and is about to become bread. The transmutation process of the wheat, which is death and rebirth. Scorpio, correct? Okay. Now, I'll tell you where they got that image from. If you go back and look at some of the descriptions of the Black Plague, there are people who have witnessed hooded figures in fields where they're growing wheat, not corn. They didn't grow corn in Europe. Corn was not discovered until they went to South America. It's not indigenous to Europe, but they had wheat. And so they're out in the wheat fields, and they would see this hooded, dark figure with this thing in its arms going across the wheat. Right? Now, of course, there was a use for the scythe, but this was different. This was different. Now we have the chimerical blending or the synthesis of this, using the scythe in the field to separate the wheat from the chaff, and this other figure. Now, there are people who claim that they saw mist coming out of this long thing that the hooded figure had in its arms. What can we infer from that? Well, what we can infer from it is that perhaps the hooded figure might have been something that was non-human and that was potentially spreading the effects of the plague. The plague was devastating, and they had a number of them. It wasn't just one. People talk about the bubonic plague. There was one big one, one significant one. That's the one where Nostradamus was involved in healing people. Chaucer writes about the plague. Boccaccio writes about the plague. It's the same plague. So the scythe is a symbol of death. It's a culling. So I got this scythe card. And in that moment, you're like, well, what? What does this mean? Does this apply to some area of my life in general? And I put it away. What I was beyond on fire on Friday. I was literally volcanic on Friday. So I go to pick up my son. We hang out. We had some tacos at our new favorite place, Chinos and Gringos. If you're ever in Austin, go to Chinos and Gringos. And it's baseball practice, our first practice. I'm managing this team again. We're back in that world. And I come home, pick up the equipment, and we pull out from my apartment complex. And I've got a major freeway now developing because Austin is becoming a megalopolis. The amount of people living here is insane, absolutely insane. The price of housing, rentals through the roof. When I first moved here, you could get a 3-bedroom place, 2-bath for about $1,100 a month. That same 3-bedroom, 2-bath place is going to run you about $1,800, $700 in the course of 3 years. Have wages increased accordingly? No, they haven't. Not here in Austin. Not the same as California living. Anyway, this place is exploding. And I've got 2 lanes going east and 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south. And the speed limit is 65 on these 2 lanes in each direction. Got a centered lane that you can turn into, and it's kind of like purgatory. You can hang out there and then move into the stream of traffic. It goes both ways. So some of you might know that they have built a mosque across the street. It does not look like a mosque. It looks like a Texas-style schoolhouse. But it is a mosque. And I pull out, and the gate is opening from the mosque. And out comes a guy in a minivan, turns left in the center lane, and he's sitting there waiting. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. But then the second minivan comes out, and I'm approaching 50 miles per hour. And the second minivan pulls right in front of me, right into me, like T-bone steak time. I'm about to slam into this guy's driver's side door. Now, this is a busy time. And the way that he was going, because he was turning, he wasn't going straight, he was angling. He was still in front of me. If I hit him at full speed, I would have probably smashed him into oncoming traffic from the other direction. And he would have hit somebody, and that somebody might have been piled in from behind when somebody could have had an accident. This is commute time. This was at 5:40 at night. Think about that. Everybody is rushing to get home, and it's a Friday night. Here I am, hurtling towards this guy. And in that moment, I hit my clutch. I've got a standard shift truck. I downshift. I hit my brake, and I swerve to the left as hard as possible. And I'm staring this guy in the face. And you should have seen the look in his face. He did not know what the hell to do. It was a combination of surprise and almost vilification. Like, how could you do this? Like, there was almost a look of disdain. Like, I was supposed to let him, like, I'm supposed to see him come out, cross 2 lanes of traffic, and allow him to get as close to his minivan buddy in the center lane. Oh, excuse the out of me. Because really, I thought that I, had the right of way by going 50 miles per hour in a 65 mile per hour lane. Excuse me, I must be wrong. I apologize. Maybe there's like a 1,000-foot kind of mosque driving rules radius that I was not aware of. Because the look on his face was surprise and disdain. Well, I don't know whose God intervened, whether it was his or mine or a combination of both. I don't know. But I was able to whip around, fishtail, and miss this guy. And I slid all the way out into oncoming traffic. And I'll never forget this moment. It's kind of like watching a movie. I mean, it's like one of the Bourne movies. And all of a sudden, Jason Bourne's doing one thing, and he gets out of one thing, and all of a sudden something else happens, and he notices it, and he gets out of that. Like only in the movies, right? Well, that was my movie. Because all of a sudden I've got oncoming traffic, and then I see it, and I accelerate, and I whip back into my lane. I didn't care if there was anybody behind me or not. I didn't have the time or the wherewithal to figure that out. I knew there was the center lane because I could get into that, and then I could get into the fast lane. And I avoided an SUV coming straight at me. And it all happened within a matter of seconds. And my kid said to me, looks over at me and says, "Holy shit, that was like the Matrix." And maybe that's one of his iconic moments. I don't know. But I tend to look at life from a personal, collective sort of perception position. Obviously, that was for me. I had all of the markings for a checkout moment that day. I was not wearing a safety belt because I'm one of these guys who, in my mind, I rebel against the notion of the safety belt and having somebody tell me to do it. And by the way, I still don't think people should tell you. I don't think there should be a fine for not having your safety belt on. I don't. I think you should be able to make up your mind. That said, you're way better off buckling your seatbelt. Way better off. You just don't need the nanny state hammering you on it. Oh, we want you to survive. Well, yeah, why? Because you pay taxes. We want you around. Come on. We want you on the tax roll. That's being cynical. But so anyway, long story short, buckling up. Because what I do is I get in my car, I drive, and about maybe 2-3 minutes after I'm driving, I put the safety belt on. Well, 2-3 minutes hadn't even passed. I had no chance. Had I hit either the minivan or the car of the oncoming traffic, the SUV, good chance I'm flying through the window. And the ramifications are not good. Needless to say, I'm not coaching baseball that night, or maybe for a while, or maybe forever. So something happened at a Mars-Pluto square. The scythe showed up. It was one of those moments in time where I think there was an exit from the freeway of life. That's what it felt like. And I got back on. But that was the energy of last Friday. That was the energy of last Friday, which is why I wasn't on the show last Friday. And then Sunday night, I was just hanging out with my kid, and we were watching movies. It was movie night. So we started off with Terminator, Schwarzenegger, right? Classic science fiction. My son is almost 13 years old. Is there some blood and guts in there? Yeah, not terrible though. I mean, compared to like, I don't know, The Dark Knight Rises. 2 of the 3 Batman films, by the way, are rated PG-13. The one with Heath Ledger as the Joker is rated PG-13. How do I know this? I looked it up. Why? Because Terminator is rated R. Although it's a 1984 rated R. Or what was it? 1989, 1990, 89, 90, that's when Terminator came out. So that R is different than today's R, trust me. So we watched Terminator. And we watched Red Dawn. That's what we did on Sunday night. I was going to tell you about my interaction with his mother around movies and ratings, but I'm not going to go there. That's why I wasn't on the show. I was having family time on Sunday night. We're back up and running. I started to do 15 minutes of Flame 2 days ago, and we got it up and running on YouTube. I did a simulcast. I got an email from Blog Talk where they've uploaded my podcast. Wasn't happening on Thursday. Mercury retrograde has just been, wow. It started off on my sun, 29 degrees Virgo on the 1st of September. And I have been going through deconstruction mode ever since. And I knew, I was like looking at this retrograde. You know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like you can see something in the distance and you're headed towards it. And it doesn't look great, right? You just know that, maybe there's something smoking on the horizon, and you just keep getting closer and closer, and the smoke keeps getting bigger and bigger and thicker, and then you look behind you, and you can't turn back. There's no other way except to go through the smoke and the fire. And I saw it coming on my chart. And people would say, "Oh, Robert Phoenix, did you know that Mercury retrograde happens on your sun?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. That's right." Ironically, it ends on my birthday. Like it's just for me. Like this Mercury retrograde is just for me. Thank you, God. Anyway, I've been going through major, major moments of deconstruction and snafus when it comes to time, circumstance, timing. I'll give you another one. I'm being very confessional today. We're going to get to the Obama stuff. We're going to get to the big picture stuff. But somehow it all relates, doesn't it? I think so. Like for me, that accident is us. It's us. You know, and I was dealing with the Muslim world. I was being confronted with the Muslim world. My consciousness was going to do a head on with the Muslim reality. I mean, it's freaking mind-blowing, right? And the guy was, I'm sorry, he was a Muslim. He came out of a mosque. I saw his face. He was Semitic. Could he have been Mexican? Sure, he could have been. But he trust me. So I almost hit a Muslim. People on Facebook, how did you know? Are you profiling? Blah, 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 blah. You know, playing the role of the politically correct little fucking, little goon squad that's out there now. The politically correct goon squad who will take you to task if you single somebody out based on their race, their sexuality, their religious preference. They're there. They are the mindless minions and the shock waves, or the first wave, not even the shock wave. They are the first wave. They are the pawns of the politically correct mindset that is choking our ability to think, articulate, and communicate. And they're doing a great job because most people don't want to be shamed. They don't want to be shamed. Oh, I'm not politically incorrect. I love everybody. Everybody's equal to me. In fact, they're more equal than me. I'm less equal than them. I'm less than them. That's how correct I am. I don't exist. You know, take it all, please, please, please. I've had so much privilege in my life. I can't take it anymore. I can't take the guilt anymore. They're doing a good job, aren't they? We're getting hit from all sides. Anyway, he was a Muslim. And I almost went head on into the Muslim experience. But I definitely avoided it. Some greater force in my 55-year-old instincts, which are still, and reflexes, which are still pretty damn good, kicked in. And then the metaphor for the oncoming car, there's something coming right at us. And we don't know what it is. Right, but it's coming at us. It could be a soccer mom in an SUV, or could be a false flag, or whatever it is. But I avoided that thing too. So I'm just going to go on public record. Based on those elements, my life as a macro moment, that's where we're headed. That is where we're headed. We are going to somehow sidestep the conflict, the crashing reality of Christianity and Islam, the East versus the West. It's going to be avoided. And we're going to avoid that oncoming thing, and we're going to get to our destination. So if anything comes out of that moment, perhaps it's a much larger picture. Now, as far as my son goes, I'm going to talk about him again, since we're in personal territory today. I promise you we'll get to Obama. He played his first football game on Wednesday. Now, it's Texas. If you live in Texas and you're a boy, now you're a girl. He's got a girl growing out on his football team. It's really funny. You know, he's wise sometimes, because we talked about her, and I'm trying to, and her name is Helen. And I said, you know what? You got to give her some credit because she broke her tail. She bruised her tailbone or broke her tailbone. She got tackled hard. Now she's walking around with like a giant maxi pad on her butt around school. I mean, it's going to be kind of embarrassing for this girl to be wearing like this big cushion on her butt because she hurt it playing football. Root chakra, right? She like completely ruptured her root chakra. Unsafe. And I said to my son, you know, hey, you got to give her some credit, man. She goes out there, she takes a licking and keeps on ticking. To quote John Cameron Swayze from The Mists of Time and the History of Time X. And he said something interesting to me. He said, you know, I don't think she wants to be out there. I think her mother is pushing her to do this. Now, I didn't bring that up. I said, well, why is that? Why do you think that? He says, I watch her. She's always got her arms crossed. She always looks like she's kind of, you know, her eyes are always darting around, moving. He said, I really think she wants to be somewhere else. I thought that was an astute observation. That girl is an unwitting pawn in her mother's quest to have some kind of cultural statement that her girl is going to play football. Her girl is going to be the one that breaks some kind of code or barrier. And what she's doing is she's breaking her daughter's spirit and breaking her daughter's tailbone in the process. So he plays his first game. And I go there and I'm like, oh, great, I can see my son play football. Yay. He's on the B team. There's the A team, the B team. He's not terribly fast. He's not terribly big. He's somewhere in the middle with both. He's never played football before. He's played a ton of baseball. He's a good athlete. He is on the third string on the B team. They have black offense, orange offense, and white offense. He plays running back on the white offense. Didn't know his third string. I go there, I watch the game, know some of the people. He gets in, he gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage. It's a small team. The kids aren't that big. The other team is better at getting to the backfield. He gets tackled. He gets tackled again. I'm like, okay, well, it's a learning experience. Then he gets the ball a third time, and this kid tries to tackle him, and then all of a sudden he puts his shoulder into him, and he knocks the kid back. I'm like, well, that's interesting, because within 3 plays, he's kind of evolved, right? He got an angle, he put his shoulder into the kid, and he knocked him down. Well, then right after that, the next player, who, of course, behind the line of scrimmage, tackles him. And then there's the 4th play, and it's happening, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching. It's coming to me. I'm on the sideline, and he gets the ball, and of course the kids are coming into the backfield, and he sees them, and the play called for him to go right into the teeth of the runners. Good luck on that. So what does he do? He makes an adjustment, he makes a cut, and he cuts it outside. This is what you're supposed to do when you play football. He gets positive yardage, and then he gets tackled. But he got positive yardage. And trust me, the positive yardage was few and far between in that game. And he made something happen. I'm like, great play, great run, great notice. It was kind of like me in the car. He saw somebody, he course corrected, he got out. Now, he eventually got tackled, but so what? Now, here's my head. My gears are turning. The parental goes, oh, he did great. He's going to get the ball again. If I'm that coach and I see that, man, I'm giving him the ball. Of course, I'm not his coach. I'm his dad. But I also coach, so I know how to do some things, right? I know these games. So they get the ball back. They get the ball back on a fumble, and they're down by the goal line. And I'm thinking, great. Get my kid in there. Let him score. Give him a great memory. Let this be an iconic moment because he can run the ball. And I sit there and I'm watching. He's not in the game. and they've got some, pardon my, I'm going to use a bad word here. They've got some little shit in the game who gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage. You breathe on him and he goes down. And at this level, trust me, you've either got to be blinding fast or you've got to have some kind of strength. My kid's got Mars and Taurus. Even though he's not fast, he's a kind of a fullback-y in his own way, right? And it happens. They don't score. They don't score. And I think all you had to do is just put my kid in the game and give him the ball. He would have scored. That's my thinking. The game goes on, and he doesn't play any defense. He doesn't play any offense until the last 1 minute and 20 seconds. But they're down by 2 touchdowns. They've got to go 80 yards in 1 minute and 20 seconds to get one. His offensive unit goes on the field, and before he can even touch the ball, the coach pulls him out of the game. Why? Big air question mark. Why? Is it because the kid he's going to put in is magically going to go 80 yards, and then they're going to get the ball back and they're going to give it to him again, and he's going to go another 80 yards and then win the game? Is that the coach's moronic thinking? Well, 2 plays later, they give the ball to the kid. He fumbles it. The other team gets it back. Game over. Well, why my kid? Why in that moment? And I have to remember that he's a Pisces, and this is what happens to Pisces. If you're Pisces, I'm sure you can relate to these kinds of moments where things happen beyond your control. And we are living in the age of Pisces, getting ready to move into the age of Aquarius, the precession of the equinoxes, the end of the Kali Yuga, the end of all suffering, which brings us back to our subject that we're going to get into here in hour number 2, which is what's going to happen during the election. What is happening in the run-up to the election? We're going to get into that in a big way in hour number 2. I'll also give you my Stranger Things update. I'm going to throw that out there. So why don't we play a little bit of music? I have to play my music now. So my apologies if you hear stuff that I've played again and again and again. Let me see if I have my German friend on here. Let's see. I've got my friend Chiron. No. What do I have? All right, yeah, let's do this. This is I'm dedicating this to my buddy from the mosque. This is Quarantine. That was a Quarantine from yours truly, aka Diamond Matrix. It is 1:01 here in South Central Texas, Austin. And we're staring down a point in the event horizon, politically, historically, a place we have never been before. We are in a new part of the universe, And I am in serious doubt as to whether we will have an elected president in November. Very serious doubt. And I'm going to go through the scenarios and try to give you my understanding and reasoning why. But before I do that, I want to bring up this piece on Trump. It's from September 7th, 2 days ago. It says, a United States Senator just sent the Department of Homeland Security a letter asking for the immediate investigation of Donald Trump's modeling agency. Now, the headline says, breaking, U.S. Senate moves to investigate Donald Trump for human trafficking details. Okay, the Senate is not moving. It is a senator, and he is requesting, or she, it's a he, is requesting that Trump be investigated by DHS for human trafficking. Now, what does that mean? What does that, when I bring up the word human trafficking, what do you think? You're thinking of like underage kids being brought to locations like Pedophilia Island or the Bohemian Grove or wherever they do their eyes wide shut kind of shenanigans. That's what you think of. At least that's human trafficking shit. I'm thinking of like underage girls, boys, in cages, in the back of trucks, tractor trailer trucks. Wouldn't that be bizarre? Wouldn't that just be utterly bizarre that you're driving down the road and there's a tractor trailer truck on the freeway? Generic, doesn't have any kind of markings on it, right? Looks like it could be hauling, I don't know, computer equipment, who knows? Generic. Or maybe it's not generic. Maybe it's a line of companies that do this. But inside that tractor trailer truck, they might have cages of young people in there that are sedated. And you wouldn't even know that, right? And maybe they'd have to go and stop at these various truck stops or whatever, but they've got ways of doing it. Maybe it's a van, who knows? I used to work with this guy who worked at the CDC many years ago. I was delivering bagels. It's back in the 90s, mid-90s. And I'd get up in the morning, I'd cruise over to the bagel shop, I'd load up my bagels, and I'd deliver them all the cafes and Whole Foods and all that stuff. It was a terrible job. Because number one, I had to get up really early, which wasn't great. Number two, I ate too many bagels. And that didn't sit well with me. At that time, I was not hip to the whole wheat thing. And it kind of crashed my system. That's another story. Anyway, this guy who I worked with, he was this manager. He was like an assistant manager or something like that. So he was, out on the floor. He'd be helping people. Sometimes he'd go out and do the bagel run if nobody showed up. And he had the most nervous demeanor that I've ever encountered. Like this guy he was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. A ticking time bomb waiting to go off. And he would be overly nice to people and weirdly interactive, like making jokes and stuff and cracking things, and not really appropriate and for too long. It's like you make a funny comment or whatever, or crack, and then, if you have good timing, then you move on to the next moment. But he would keep like pressing things. And it would just make people uncomfortable. Well, that was one side of him. Another side of him was that he could really snap. And one day he said, do you know what I used to do? You know what I used to do? I said, what? He said, I work for the CDC. I said, okay. So I work for the CDC. Yeah, I work for the CDC. So you have no idea what they do. You have no idea. And I felt like I was in 12 Monkeys. I said, really? What do they do? He says, they make things at the CDC that would terrify you. And they drive around in unmarked vans. And they carry this stuff around. You have no idea. And I'm like, well, maybe you think, maybe I do. And maybe you're making it very clear. Oh, this guy was wired tight. Anyway, I'm just kind of riffing again. Breaking, U.S. Senate moves to investigate Donald Trump for human trafficking. So it's the Senate trafficking. Think of, let's just look at that headline. Pearson McKinney. A United States senator just sent the Department of Homeland Security a letter asking for the immediate investigation of Donald Trump's modeling agency after an August 30th publication by media outlet Mother Jones in which Trump's company was accused of trafficking illegal immigrants to work as models. An investigation by Mother Jones uncovered countless cases of Trump ignoring immigration laws by employing illegal immigrants to work for Donald Trump's model management. Trump model managers profited from using foreign models who came to the United States on tourist visas that did not permit them to work here, according to 3 Trump models, all non-citizens, who shared their stories with Mother Jones. Financial and immigration records included in a recent lawsuit filed by a 4th former Trump model showed that she too worked for Trump's agency in the United States without a proper visa. Who's the senator? Oh, it's Barbara Boxer. It's not even a male. I thought it was a guy because I saw this name. What was it? Leon Rodriguez. She got her letter. Thank you for your attention to this matter. BB. This isn't the first time Trump has been accused of shipping immigrants in with the sole intention of exploiting them for near slave wages. One woman in particular was set to be on Trump's canceled MTV show Girls of Heads or Hall. Earlier this summer, she spoke out against Trump, saying he brought her here for no reason other than to be able to pay her less than minimum wage. Unfortunately for Republicans, they don't know that the anti-immigrant Republican they nominated to lead their party was nothing more than a phony, showboating trafficker of women. Despite the illusions Trump has cast out about his strict immigration policies, his past has been proven to be far more telling than his mouth. And this website is called Bipartisan Report. The person who wrote this is Pearson McKinney. Pearson McKinney is a lifelong liberal activist, freelance writer, and managing editor of the Bipartisan Report and Americans Against the Tea Party. There's nothing bipartisan about this. Pearson McKinney, who even knows who Pearson McKinney is? I don't. Okay, we're living in a land where nobody is clean. Nobody is clean. Period. End of story. It's a she, Pearson McKinney. She's a young woman, Pearson McKinney. Yes. You know what's happening? I'm gonna give you. Here we go. This is her bio. Pearson McKinney is a lifelong outspoken liberal political activist, freelance writer, and managing editor of Bipartisan Report and Americans Against the Tea Party. This is all. Let's see. Hold on. Okay, this is a big. This is all you need to know about Pearson McKinney. She has a cartoon on her aattp.org author page. And there's a guy in a lab coat saying a study linking to autism to childhood vaccinations has not only been debunked, but is an elaborate fraud. We trust that this ends the matter. And then there's a woman who's got her fingers in her ears, anti-vaccine activist, la, 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 la. This is Pearson McKinney. Pearson McKinney doesn't give a shit about the truth. She is a paid hacktivist. Now, if you look at what's going on, and look, am I exonerating Trump for bringing women in on tourist visas so they can work? No, I'm not exonerating him. But let's look at the fact that we're doing the same thing in outsourcing jobs in America to people in Mumbai who are working for nearly less than minimum wage in Mumbai. How's that? I mean, look, if we want to, we can parse this thing until the last genetically modified cow comes home. And nobody's going to nobody's going to have the moral high ground. It just doesn't exist. It does not exist. And the one person who came as close to the moral high ground as possible, Ron Paul, even though he's a Freemason, got shut out and drowned out during the last time he was in the election, and even worse before that. So good luck having the moral high ground and trying to move your way into the center of the wheel. There's a major, major piece that's happening right now that not a lot of people are talking about. And I'm gonna bring it up. We are on the verge of a generational clash that we have not seen since the 1960s. I don't know if you haven't been paying attention, but Twitter has become a battleground over the past week between boomers, Gen Xers, and the millennials. If you watch Survivor, right? Survivor, you can always kind of get a pulse of what's happening with TV at times, and shows like Survivor. Survivor is doing a Gen X versus millennials edition to Survivor. And that's getting played out on Twitter. And what's happening now is there are a wave of millennials, and mostly women, not always men. And I don't care what you think about what I'm about to say. I don't care. I don't care if I lose. I'm doing my Colin Kaepernick moment, all right? And I hope my jersey sales and my ratings go up as a result of this. You know, all 500 people who listen to this on YouTube. That's going to change, by the way. We're seeing an influx of the press corps who are young, who are female, who are millennial driven, and they're going to be driving the content, the alternative media content. Now, there are two forms of the alternative media. There's the alternative media, and then there's the alternative media, which is the alternate to mainstream media, New York Times, the dinosaurs, the fossils, the CNNs. Now, there's a level of alternative media like Huffington Post. And by the way, they made Arianna Huffington go away. This is clearly an indication of the culture war we're about to engage in. Arianna Huffington goes away. She sold her interest in HuffingtonPost.com. She was there for a while. She was a figurehead. She's dismissed. It is symbolic. So now we have the alternative media being taken over by the millennials who are now in their late 20s, early 30s. So we're getting content now that is being driven by them. And then we have the alternative media, which is in its own way being driven by millennials too, but it's a different stripe. Like the alt-right is millennial driven. I hate to bring this up to the millennials who think that they're progressive and liberal, anything kind of goes agenda is their only version of the story. No, you've got a dark shadow. It is the alt-right, Milo and all those characters who are borderline fascists. That's another version of it, but they're driving their own version of the narrative. So we're about to head into a culture clash, unlike anything we've ever seen. Now, I was reading another piece. This is just something completely different, had nothing to do with politics per se. And it was a writer, and I was intrigued by it. I was just cruising Yahoo. Why I've given up on Amy Schumer and Lena Dunham. I'm like, oh, this could be interesting. This could be interesting because Amy Schumer and Lena Dunham are tools. They're tools. They're tools for the Zio media. Trust me on this. They are Zyro Media tools and implants, right? What happened in Baton Rouge, it wasn't Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Louisiana. There was a shooting there at a theater. What was the movie? Trainwreck. Who was the star of the movie? Amy Schumer. Who's her uncle? Chuck Schumer. What has Chuck Schumer done for almost the entirety of his life? He's represented the Zionist faction, the dual citizens of Israel and the United States constantly, and is a proponent of gun control and completely eradicating the Second Amendment. Is there any coincidence that it happened at that theater, in that movie, where Amy Schumer was doing her thing, and the guy who supposedly did it supposedly was a drifter, he was white, he was this, he had all the hallmarks of a freaking Manchurian candidate. Lena Dunham. Lena Dunham has openly said that, hey, I had sex with my little sister. Big deal. You know, if you haven't had sex with your little sister, your little brother, you ain't living. These things happen. You know, and it was kind of this weird call to somehow celebrate the fact that she was unashamed that she had incest. And you know what? Maybe it's okay. You know, maybe for somebody who's been incestually violated, they could look at that and go, wow, yeah, somebody did that to me. I can talk about it now. Hey, maybe it's a healing thing. Or maybe it's just kind of a soft promotion. Hey, okay? So I'm thinking, all right, well, you know, maybe this person is really getting down and looking at the influences. Where the influences come from? I couldn't have been further from the truth. What she did is she held up a politically correct mirror and said, well, I've seen tweets that really look like they're racist to me. You know, there is a black character on Lena Dunham's or Amy Schumer's show. He's a black conservative, and they wind up dating. I think that this is a token gesture, and I think really kind of inappropriate. Like, what would have been the appropriate kind of characterization to make this black character that she winds up dating a felon? Would that have been a really appropriate? Okay, I get it now. So if he had been a felon and accused of, I don't know, beating up his last girlfriend, and, you know, accused of maybe selling a few dime bags of coke. Oh, that is so progressive. That is so progressive. She's dating the guy on her show, and he's got golden fangs for teeth. That is really progressive. And you know what's even really more progressive is that guy is real. He actually did those things, and now he's on the show. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And now I actually hear that she's actually doing it with him. Wow. Now this is progressive. This is liberal. We just found out. Yeah, well, he just beat up Lena Dunham too. It's okay. She deserved it. She has white privilege. She'll get over it. It's good for her. I swear to God, this is where it's all going. These are the benchmarks that this woman, and it went on and on and on and on and on and on. And I mean, this thing was about 3,000 words long. I mean, she was building a JFK-like case to disenfranchise herself from Lena Dunham and Amy Schumer. And I thought to myself, this is significant because she is not a lone gunman. She and the Pearson McKinneys of the world are out there, and they're on the front lines, and they are creating the social memes. They are bending the critical thinking, twisting and shaping how we articulate our thoughts. Because there's a young person reading that who says to themselves, oh, geez, I thought I liked Amy Schumer. I thought I liked Lena Dunham. And I got to rethink this. Well, where do I go? Where's my moral compass? It's spinning out of control. That's where your moral compass is. Because we have decided, we have allowed now to let these ninnies dictate what's right and what's not right based on the politically correct code of ethics that they have been indoctrinated in the colleges across America. And I think the best thing we could do right now is I think we should just have it out, because I think that there's a lot of aggression that the millennials have towards the boomers and towards Generation X, and even me. I'm in the middle. I'm not a boomer and I'm not a Gen X. I am Gen Zero. Look it up. Gen Zero. Generation Jones. I am free to comment on this. I've got my issues with Pluto and Leo people. First at the table. And I went through this years ago. You know, if you go back into my website, and look, I hate doing this because when you say, well, I thought about this, you're kind of jumping the shark a little bit. But I was into this stuff years ago. I was doing the anti-boomer stuff back in, 2010, 6 years ago. I went on it, and I was looking squarely at our spiritual leaders who sold us down the river. Now it's really vogue to out people, right? Hey, we're going to go out Zen Gardner. We're going to go out David Icke. We're going to go out this guy, that guy. I mean, the truthing thing is out there now. Saturn, Sagittarius, it's out there. Oh, he's a liar. He's a gatekeeper. He's this, he's that. If you want to keep up on it, go, what's that guy's name? Chanter. CG Chanter, whatever his name is. He's up on this. It's into the expose now. I was doing this years ago. Sorry, but I was looking at people like Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson. The truth people, I kind of took that on a little bit. I looked at Wilcock. I looked at Ike. I looked at Alex Jones, Jeff Rentz to a certain extent. I was into trying to, tear apart the gatekeepers. I moved on. It's out there now. You can go for it. You can, So this is happening. This is happening. We're getting it all on the table. Hopefully. But we've got a culture clash coming, and it's coming with the millennials. They are childhood's end. They are Crowley's generation, Pluto Scorpio. They are Crowley's generation. Crowley, time and time again, said, my children are down the line. They're down the line. And my children are going to wake up. And they are going to run the planet. This is why we got the version of Childhood's End last year. And by the way, who was talking about Childhood's End even before it aired raises his hands. You can look it up on my website. The millennials are Childhood's End. Now, there's another version of Childhood's End that's connected to Pluto and Sag kids, and that gets into Stranger Things. That gets into Midnight Special, where these kids have these powers. So these are like the supernatural, psychokinetic version. The occult version is what's running around right now. And Pluto and Scorpio are powerful, and they will unite. They are the first generation in a very long time. We've got to go back to pre-Pluto and Aries, where this all starts. You go back into people like uh, the first Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, right? You get into the robber barons, the steel barons. They're all Pluto and Aries people. Before that, we have Pluto and Pisces, and that Pluto and Pisces is a different kind of time. It's a fairly interesting time. It's when religions change, and this is on the heels of Martin Luther. You have all these breakaway churches, and through the breakaway churches, you have the reinterpretation of Christianity. You have things like revivals. You have things like conversion. It's a whole new ballgame with Pluto in Pisces. Pluto in Aries is when we have the rise of the strong man, the Iron Man, the robber baron. So we went all the way around the wheel. Pluto, now Pluto, Scorpio, first transpersonal generation. They are linked in an inner network generationally that other people aren't. Because Pluto and Scorpio, one, is psychic, and two, it rides the rails of collective energy. They are more dialed into the collective. It's just the way it is. So I think we need to have it out. I just think we need to have it out. You know, the olive branch, Pluto and Scorpio is not about the olive branch. They're not an olive branch generation. Sorry, it's just not the way it is. Not. I'll give you another really dark version of Pluto and Scorpio. Hello, Isis. That's right. If you're a millennial, you got a dark version of yourself out there. It's called ISIS. It's called the fatwa. The fatwa. It is the rape and pillaging and burning of Europe. Well, you may be okay with that. You may like that. You may think it's cool. Right on, man. Right on. Burn it down. Burn it down. I just think it's inevitable. I think we're going to have it. I think we're going to have it out, and it may be across racial divisions and lines, possibly, but it's looking more and more like cultural, generational. Be interesting. Who do you put your money on in a situation like that? Do you put your money on the combined forces of Pluto and Libra, with a little generation Jones thrown in? It's a pretty significant number. You put your money on Pluto and Scorpio. Now, see, I think Pluto and Scorpio is ruthless. They're ruthless. And I think they could be relentless. I would not underestimate this generation. I know the millennials they you know, millennial this, they don't like it. They're going to be out to prove something. And generationally, they've got Neptune in Capricorn, Uranus in Capricorn, Pluto in Scorpio, they're not going away. They are not going away. They are not going to be displaced. I'll tell you who might displace them at some point. It's the Pluto and Aquarius kids. They might displace them. That's down the line. And they'll have to deal with it, right? They'll have to, just like the baby boomers, Pluto and Leo, fixed sign, ultimately would have to deal with these guys squaring their Pluto. Well, they're going to have to deal with Pluto and Aquarius. God help them. Let's get back to Pluto in Virgo, Generation Jones, and one Barack Hussein Obama. So I was sent an email, or it was a link. My apologies. It was a link about mental health in the United States. And apparently, there are these sort of temporary stations that are popping up around the country in private land, places like Tennessee, El Paso. They're kind of all over the place. And apparently what they are is they're like these stations where you are going to be brought in to have some form of medical, psychological diagnostics. And the tests are almost virtually doomed to flesh out dissidents. And you will wind up being relocated. And apparently these are starting to show up all over the place. I haven't seen one here in Texas, but I've been reading about them. And if you don't go, if you're not removed and taken into a quote unquote relocation center or a reorientation center, which is, by the way, what Bill Ayers and his weathermen were getting erect about back in the 1960s. You will be still in the general population, but there will be probably some level of mandatory medication going on, because that is where they want everybody. They want people in a medicated state, in a state where they're much more docile and malleable and politically correct. By the way, if you're still drinking tap water, you're insane. You should be getting a filter. You should be getting, at the very least, pure filtered water and put it in jugs. I've stopped drinking tap water years ago. Occasionally I have a sip in a restaurant if I'm really thirsty. And it's not a glass, it's a sip. Why? Because there's high levels of fluoride in the tap water. Anyway, these things are showing up now. We have the Safe Cities Initiative, which is taking place all around the country. That's happening now. There are people from the UN that are going into police departments and they are talking to local police. And they're instructing them now on their methodologies. So there is a new sheriff in town, and it's the United Nations. The internet is about to get handed over at the end of the month to the United Nations. Do you see where there is a transition of power that's taking place right now? You're watching it, you're witnessing it, you're a part of it. Who's going to be overseeing the elections? United Nations, along with DHS, the two entities I've just been talking about. Here's the scenario, and I've done the chart on election night, and it's not great. The day after the election, Mars goes into Aquarius. You go to 10 o'clock California time. Mars moves into Aquarius. And that is the energy that's martial and revolutionary. My thoughts are that the election itself obviously will be rigged. You can vote. I suggest you vote, doesn't matter. But at least assuage your conscience. And the election will be contested. It will either be too close to call, and that's if Hillary makes it. And that's a big question mark. It'll be too close to call. It'll be something will come into question. Maybe there might be some voter irregularity, which they're able to spot. And that in and of itself becomes a false flag. But I could easily see a 2000 scenario come back and come into play where they just drag this thing out, that it's going to be examined and looked at. In the meantime, Obama will still be the interim president. And this will drag into the new year, into January and February. February is when they're supposed to have the transition of power. So then what? The pharaoh retains his position. He's still sitting in the throne. I'd be very surprised if Trump and or Hillary are president. Very surprised. Hillary looks like she's on her last legs. She may not make it. I have said that I think Hillary's going to wind up going into a hospital and we never see her again. I mean, does she do anything but cough now? She's in serious trouble. And all she's doing is going around. She's not even really doing any speeches. She did that thing in Cleveland on Labor Day. She was up there for 4 or 5 minutes. That's it. That's it. And she spends the majority of her time going to the likes of Cher's house or Linda Rothschild's house and collecting money. Did you know she charged $2,500 per kid at Linda Rothschild's house for the kid to ask her a question in front of everybody? $2,500. Not bad. She is just skimming the fat. That's all she's doing. She knows it. She also knows that she may not make it into office. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. And who knows with Trump? I don't think this is going to fly. The only thing that I can think of that's a scenario that makes any kind of sense, and you got to be ready for this, is if there is a military coup. And that could happen. I would put that at about a 15% possibility. Because the military is firmly behind Donald Trump. He has 30 retired generals that have come out in support of him. Now, I'm not one of these military guys. I'm just not. The military, they've just been the police force for multinational corporations and the CIA. That's all they've been. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm offending folks in the military, especially Perry. Perry, God bless you, Perry. I know you have your stance was a powerful moment of awakening for you, and it has been talking about Perry Ulander, and we've been blessed by what it's brought out in you. But from what I can see now, and have been for a long time, these are the troops for the multinational corporation. So I'm not a huge military guy, but if they still value the Constitution, if they still value some level of sovereignty and freedom, then they might be okay. And this is where it's at. This is where we are. This is what's going on. We are in endgame, boys and girls. It is coming. It is coming. You're going to be around to witness it. If for some reason Obama stays in office, or if for some reason there's shenanigans at the voting booth and Hillary becomes president if she lives that long, or it's Tim Kaine or whoever, we're going to have problems. Because the people who have been awoken from their slumber, who are pissed off, they're not going to be happy. Now, are they going to do anything? Will the silent majority who's been moved to speak and has anointed Donald J. Trump as their figurehead, as their channel for the Vox Populi? Will they move from being pummeled at Trump rallies and events by aggressors who believe they're fascists and Nazis, will they strike back? I'm not sure they will. I don't think that's who they are. That's not who they are. These people tend to play by rules. They like to think that the rule of order works, that the rule of the land and the rule of order and the rule of law applies to everyone, and many of them follow Christian law and the Christian rule of order, which prevents them and turns them into pacifists, where they simply turn the other cheek. I think they are, for the most part, psychologically incapable of doing more than gathering together and shouting at the media. Now, perhaps they'll prove me wrong. Perhaps there's, a couple of guys out there in their late 50s who see it happen and they see what's coming and they say, you know what? I got nothing to lose. We're going to deal with 8 more years of this. I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. That's not me, by the way. I'm just getting that on public record. And you might see some things happen. And maybe that is really the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. The final poke at the dog. In which case, I guarantee you, the troops are ready to roll. The UN tanks are ready to roll. They've got the nice spray paint. But let's say they don't do that. Let's say I'm right that it's mostly a Christian pacifist kind of majority or movement. What's to prevent a quote-unquote false flag, or 3 or 4 of them, from occurring? Because the social milieu has been cast, the stage has been set, the accelerants have been distributed across all forms of society, so it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to see them take a match and light the tinder. Do you see what I'm saying? In the advent of somehow Trump actually winning, what do you think the other side's going to do? Is the other side going to just lay down? For millennials, Black Lives Matter, we are at a flashpoint, a super flashpoint. It is coming. It's coming in November. We might see a little bit in October. We're going to see some in September, but it's really coming in November. The economic news is not great. I talked about this on Gaiam. My interview should be coming up with Regina soon. And with Mercury retrograde Virgo, service industry. Keep your eyes on the service sector, service-oriented jobs. And the news around it. So this is where we are. This is where we are. This is where we're headed. Does that mean that it's all going to turn out this way? Well, I've been right quite a bit. But something has to give on this planet. It has to give. It is a boil that is festering. And that boil needs to be lanced. And the problem is that we're not all on the same page, at least not in this country. I talked about this yesterday when I was in 15 Minutes of Flame, which did not hit YouTube yet. But I talked about how if you look at Russia, if you look at China, if you look at Israel, and these are the 3 countries that I could come up with as readily as I could. All 3 of them practice a form of nationalism. Like, does China, I threw Saudi Arabia in there, the theocratic state. Does China take immigrants in? Hell no. Does Russia take immigrants in? Hell no. Does Israel take them in? No. What about Saudi Arabia? No. No. So these countries practice a form of nationalism. They think and live for the most part, in unity, in a unified field. Now, does that mean there aren't dissenters? There's always going to be dissenters. Always. There are dissenters to Islam in Saudi Arabia, but, good luck on that. You go to the hanging square. Are there dissenters in Russia? Sure they are, but they keep it to themselves. Russia doesn't mess around. Remember Pussy Riot? Remember what they were up to? Have you seen them lately? Answer is no. Why? Because Russia let it happen for a little while. And I guarantee you somebody from Putin's government paid the Pussy Rioters a little visit. A brief blip on the screen. Look, they tried in their own way to create a soft coup in Russia. They tried so hard. Pussy Riot, Femen. They tried to degrade the Olympics, the Russian Olympics. Didn't work. Did not work. There weren't enough takers for that deal in Russia. Sorry. And that was pretty close to being under Hillary Clinton's watch. Pretty close. It's not, certainly the playbook was, in the drawer in her office, which I really doubt she probably went to very much. China doesn't do it. So you have all these countries that practice a form of nationalism. Meanwhile, Europe and the United States, South America, but mostly Europe and the United States, we've got to practice multiculturalism and diversity. So certain parts of the globe are allowed to be nationalistic. And those countries oftentimes are the greatest defenders of human rights. And where are the great defenders of human rights when it comes to those countries? They're nowhere. Nowhere. Nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be heard. And if they are, their voices are muted. But inside the walls, right? Inside the walls of the empire, dissent is the order of the day. These countries that have been practicing nationalism, they're just waiting. Russia's been preparing for war. Their people, I've talked to my contacts in Russia, they've been preparing for war. They know it's coming. They know it's coming. And they're ready. They are ready. They've got it all figured out. They've got their food. They've got the petroleum. They've been stacking and stocking. They know exactly what they're doing. China, same deal. They've been preparing. Because they're waiting for that moment when the West has become so weakened by this virus that has invaded the immune system. And it is a virus that is pervasive. It's across all sectors of society. It eats away at our collective soul. Our values are in flux. They are in temporal shift. And when you are in temporal shift, when you're in flux, you are in what? You're in chaos. And we are in chaos now. Because there is no prevailing series or system of values. They're in competition with one another. And it's this kind of energy, this kind of chaos, which is exactly what Saul Alinsky and the Luciferians from the Chicago School have strategized and preached about for years. It's the polarization. And the polarization is getting worse. So the countries that have not allowed themselves to polarize, who've been seeking and working and actively towards not only their survival, but their dominance. Their time is coming, and they're going to test at some point It's the nature and the order of things. They're going to test the stability and the ability of the West to survive. Europe's scared. Europe is scared. Why is Europe scared? They're not scared of the Muslims, although maybe they should be. I'll tell you who they should be scared of. They should be scared of Russia, because I could easily see Russia just moving through Europe. And the reason why Europe is so terrified that, or concerned that Britain pulled out of the EU, is because through Britain, it's the United States that protects the EU. It's the United States through NATO that protects the EU. And Trump, if he's elected, will re-envision the relationship between NATO. Europe has some issues, big time issues. They are vulnerable, and the United States is vulnerable as well. And Russia and China and Saudi Arabia, Israel, they're all sitting back, watching, waiting for that moment in time when we stumble. And that could be coming very quickly. Stranger Things. I got more to come up with on Stranger Things. Number 2 is on my website, the second update. Number 3 is so personal. And I've got information on Stranger Things that nobody else has. Nobody else has. And connecting in a way, I just got to get to it, clear my decks, and get to it. It's been a busy time. Personally, interpersonally busy as well. I've been going through a ton. Ultimately good, but a ton. I have a nice offer going on my website, which, you know, I have a friend who's a psychic, Jolie Evans. She's really good. I've had Jolie on the show. I'm going to bring her back on because I know a lot of people like to have psychic readings. I'll just bring her on the Friday show, and I'll let her talk, and we'll do some stuff. She's really quite affordable as a psychic. I'll bring Jolie on, and we'll talk. And I don't know where I'm going with this with Jolie. Anyway, with Stranger Things, I've had a time. Oh, yes, she told me. I've only got 4 minutes. She's studying with an astrologer, and her astrology courses are $1,000, $2,000, and $3,000. You're paying a total of $6,000 to learn how to be an astrologer with this woman. I forget her name, Sharon something. $6,000. I've got a 16-hour course on my website for $295. And I'll put it against her $6,000 course. But more than that, I have an offer right now, and it's going to go through Mercury retrograde, where if you sign up for my course, you're going to get a 33% discount, which means you're only going to pay $195. Now, you're not going to be a part of the webinar. You're not going to get a half-hour reading. You will not get the natal report. You will get a chart, and you will get the 16-hour course. It's on my website. The code is Labor33. Labor33. You go there, you go to my website, you sign up, you're going to get my course for $195, but you don't get all the bells and whistles. You get a 16-hour course plus your chart. You're saving $100. You could go pay $6,000 to Sharon, whoever her name is, course. You could pay $195 for mine. You figure out what you want, and I'll put my course against hers any day. All right, Stranger Things, more on Stranger Things coming. I want to thank you for being a part of the show. You listened to the Friday FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix. Covered a lot of territory today. Tell your friends about my show, please. I'm going to get active here in promoting what I'm doing. And I have a self-interest in this because I think I'm good at what I do. I listen to a lot of people. I'm getting on YouTube. I'm doing the video stuff. I'm breaking down. I'm going through the fifth wall, okay? But I listen to a lot of people I listen to Alex Jones. I listen to Jeff Rentz. I am as good as these people. I am telling you that right now. And I think we need a voice. And it's not just my voice, it's our voice. And sometimes certain people have the responsibility of carrying that voice. It's on the burden of my shoulders. Let me do it. Tell your friends, let's communicate, let's wake up, and let's change this damn world and turn it into something that is going to be sustainable, 60 seconds, loving, and sane. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and here's Philip K. Dick. Have a great weekend.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu. Perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.